Hi, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. We're here on Tuesday the 12th. It's snowing outside, so I hope you're safely ensconced at home and in out of the weather. I hear we're going to get up to 8 inches, and so I'll be waddling my way home after this later. Like I said, it's Tuesday the 12th. If you're watching live, it's 6 o'clock. This show is repeated at various other times during the week. If you are watching on Tuesday afternoon, the call-in number is 640-3091. That's 640-3091. There's a lot. Let me shut this thing down a little bit. There's a lot going on in our city as usual, and it just never ceases to amaze me how things continue. Let me just do a couple of things first. We do have the Manchester Proud group is holding one of its last sessions. Just let me have a look here on February the 13th, which is tomorrow, at Manchester City Library from 4 to 5 p.m. It's a student and family listening session, and they've been holding these listening sessions around the district, around the city, over the last, since the late summer or early fall. So anyway, there's one on tomorrow from 4 to 5 p.m. They've been having these all across the city, but it's one of your last opportunities because they are coming to an end pretty soon. Let me see. And then there's an English for New Americans listening session is on at the First Congregational Church on the 13th, also tomorrow at 6:15 to 7:15. And then they have another session there on the 14th at the same time. So Wednesday and Thursday night, 6:15 to 7:15. And then there's a student and family listening session at the Waterworks Cafe at 250 Commercial Street on the 16th. And then the last one on here is the Franco-American Centre listening session is on February the 18th at over at 100 St. Anselm Drive, and that's on 6:30 to 7:30 on February 18th. Those are the last listening sessions. And there's been a lot of talk, and I don't want to spend too much time on it tonight, but there's been a lot of talk about Manchester Proud, and there's a small cadre of people in the city who are sort of distrustful of everything but their own loud voices. And all I can say about Manchester Proud is that it's a group of business people and community members and just involved citizens in the city of Manchester who came together to see what might be done about developing a strategic plan for our schools, and it's been funded by private individuals here in the city of Manchester, and their methodology has been as transparent as one could expect it to be. They have gone out without an agenda to do listening sessions. They've canvassed door to door and on street corners. They have held listening sessions in school. They've been in every school. They've been in community centres. They've been everywhere. And in those sessions, they're there to listen. They're not offering solutions. I don't understand what some people who go to those meetings don't understand. It's explained at the outset of the meeting that we're gathering information about our schools. They spent a lot of time, and they've employed an outside company to come in and look at lots of data, like previous strategic plans, like the size of our schools, our everything about our schools, and they've been gathering all this in any place they can find information, and they'll take more if it's given to them, and they're trying to gather this, and then they're talking to the community. And yet you go to these listening sessions, and people will say, so what is it that what's Manchester's Proud's position on whatever it might be? And Manchester Proud doesn't have a position yet. It's in the information gathering mode. Now it is about the transition to a collating the information and drilling down into the information and deciding on options for the future mode. But up until as of now, they're still in this gathering mode. And despite that, there are still people in the city, a small but even actually not that loud, but a small group who still sort of distrust it because they're afraid, I guess, of what the answers of the results might be. So. With that, I would just say, get out there if you still haven't had an opportunity. You can also go online to Manchester Proud and .org, and you can correspond with them there. But there is as I said, tomorrow afternoon from 4 to 5 p.m. at the City Library. There is a listening session, and of course that's going to bring us neatly to Valentine's Day, and. So I wish everybody a very happy Valentine's Day, especially my beautiful wife if she's listening. Happy Valentine's Day, and I know it's a wonderful occasion for kids, etc. to spread the love, so to speak. So, without further ado, I have to tell you, I was at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting. Last Tuesday night, last Monday night perhaps, I get them muddled up, but whichever, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen meeting last week, and I spoke there about to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and I was there to ask them to listen to the to Attorney Andrew Valinsky, also Executive Councillor Andrew Valinsky. He and his partner, who were two of the people who took the Claremont case. So they've been involved in state funding of schools in New Hampshire for decades now. And they have a presentation that they've been bringing around the state of New Hampshire and doing presentations in various parts of the state to various audiences, and they're very happy. They're looking for other audiences to present to, and they'll do, a Chamber of Commerce or Rotary or Kiwanis or whatever it might be, parents group or anything else. But their information is very compelling, and it's objective. It's just data going back over time, and it demonstrates the disparity in the state of New Hampshire when it comes to educational funding and educational outcomes. And basically the data shows that despite the attempts by their attempts and the courts' attempts, etc., to try to get our legislature to enact sensible funding laws for our schools, that all attempts have been stymied, and that effectively the result of the various cases that have been taken, the most famous was Claremont 1, of course, that we're still in the position where the state of New Hampshire is not meeting the requirement of the Constitution of the state of New Hampshire, which requires the state to fund an adequate education for every child in the state of New Hampshire. It simply doesn't do it, so it's in breach of the Constitution, and it seems nothing can drive our legislators to actually step up to the plate and to fund our school properly. What also jumps off those pages and those numbers when you look at them is when they do the comparative analysis across the various towns, the big picture that comes across is that the poorer property towns, that people in those towns have to dig far deeper into their pockets to fund their schools than people in property-rich towns do. And so the taxes are generally much higher in the property poor towns as far from a school's point of view, and it's still not sustainable. And I think I talked here last week about the fact that in the town of Berlin, the city of Berlin, it's actually a city. Then in the city of Berlin, the last elementary school in the city of Berlin is closing this year. They simply can't afford even one elementary school in the city, and they're going to roll the elementary school, the students, into the high school and dedicate a piece of the high school to be an elementary school. That's a shocking indictment in what is the 6th or 7th richest state in the United States. And when we talk about the New Hampshire way, make no mistake that part of the New Hampshire way is to shortchange lots of communities in the state, and particularly the more poor you are, or if you're not from the richest towns in the state, then you get pretty well shafted. And so, the fact that we can't get agreement across political ideologies, that the city of Manchester, I mean, I've argued for years about, and I shouldn't even have to argue because the numbers are there. It's not like, it's terrible you have to argue about, that the sky is blue and the sun's coming up in the morning, but seemingly that's what one has to do. But besides the blatant fact that we underfund our schools, it is also true that the state of New Hampshire is underfunding our schools, and you'd imagine that people from the left and right, conservatives and liberals and everybody in between could agree that that Manchester could have a united voice going up to Concord and saying, you've got to stop shafting the city of Manchester. We learned at the school board meeting last night, I think it was, 39% of ELL kids in the state of New Hampshire are in the Manchester School District. So, well, some of those kids are doing great, and we heard some good numbers about them last night, some of them exceeding state averages and things like that, but it's still a big challenge, and we also have, our high levels of poverty and other social issues, and for the state to kind of rub its hands or wash its hands of the entire thing is simply not on. But I want to go to that's what I went in front of the school board with to talk about last week, and I did hear Mayor Craig say that it was her intention that she discussed with Mr. Valinsky and his partner that they were going to organise a joint meeting of the Board of School Committee and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, where the numbers for demonstrating the inadequacy of state funding could be shared, and they'd be able to see the numbers and have a question and answer session. So I was very pleased with that's going to go ahead. And then I went home, and because I guess I like punishment or something, I turned on the TV to watch the what else was going on in the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And let me grab a call here 1 second. Good evening, caller. Who have we got?
Eddie.
Hello, Eddie.
Jim?
Hey, yes.
Hey, Jim. How you doing?
Hi, Eddie. How are you?
Good. Hey, Jim, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what is your input on city-side spending? Like, say, the police contract and the fire contract. And the reason I asked, Jim, is I know you're an advocate for school spending, right?
I'm an advocate for schools, yeah.
So, okay, all right, school funding, advocate for schools. So when these, what I consider excessively generous contracts come through for the firefighters and the police, and also things like snow days, chief days, hazard pay for the police. Here's a good one. They increased their minimum for special details, like athletic events at schools from 3 hours to 4 hours, right? You're familiar with that, right?
Right, I heard about that, yep.
So what's your input on that, Jim? Because, obviously, we got one city here. The money's finite. It seems like an excessive amount of money goes to city-side spending. But I never hear you or really any other education advocates comment on that. The only one who used to comment on it was Pete Sorrentino.
Right.
But he ain't around anymore. So I call it the Pete Sorrentino analysis. Yeah. I wanted to get your input on that.
Well, thank you, Ed. I appreciate the call. Thank you.
All right, Jim.
Take care. All right. Thanks a lot. So Ed, you're not going to like the answer, actually, because the answer will be, and I apologize because I know you'll throw your hands up and say, well, there you go. I do understand where you're coming from, and I hear you. The reason why it's a non-answer is because I do know that the city spending in, I know when we look at if you look at a pie chart of our taxes and the spending in the city of Manchester, that the proportion of our taxes spent on schools is much lower as a percentage of the total than it is in any other town or comparable towns in the state. So that by implication, the city side, as you might call it, the spending on the city side is much higher. The reason why it's a non-answer, Eddie, is because it's just like the schools thing. It takes sort of years and dedicated time and concentration and turning over stones and examining and rethinking. And just when you think you got the answer, you got to relook at it again. It's a full-time job getting a handle on the education spending in the city. And I have not done the due diligence on the rest of city spending. So that's why it's a non-answer. I mean, it's easy to say. I know that there are those, for instance, who feel that the police contract the last time was approved and it was done. Last year, maybe a year and a half ago now, it was there was a contract agreed which hadn't been fully negotiated. It was the request of the Patrolmen's Association, and the contract was agreed. And a lot of people were aggrieved by that, saying that was a very generous deal for the police. I don't know what the answer to that is. I like if this was on the school side, I know that the way measures are done on the police side is, for instance, one of the things is number of calls per officer. For instance, there's lots of metrics, but that's one. Right, so it says you can look at other towns in the state, other towns across the country, and you can say how many officers per emergency call or per call do we have, and then you get. And there's a number in there that's used across all police departments across the country where they can look at their efficiency number. And that's one of the places I would look. And frankly, I should be concerned as a taxpayer in Manchester to look at those things and to know, but I actually haven't done that. I know that generally speaking, since the tax cap has been in place, we have been holding spending. According to this tax cap. So as you know, the department after department in the city of Manchester over recent years has been asked to reduce its budget by 1% to 2% per annum. So I'm sorry to ramble. I don't have a good answer. If I were ever to flip and start looking at police and fire things, I don't know where the answers would be. So I'm sorry, and you might think that that's a fudge, and you'd say, "Well, here's Jim being disingenuous and not being direct." I've said the thing that you like most about what I said is that it's clear that on the city side that the spending on city services in Manchester is much higher than it is in comparable towns. The problem with knowing just that, though, is what's driving that? Is it because we have needier populations because we're in an urban area compared to others? And I just don't know. But I do appreciate the call. I do like to try and answer directly, but I don't want to be making stuff up either. It'd be easy to say, police are overpaid and whatever, and I don't know that, so I can't. I can't say that. I can say, though, let me segue into what I was going to talk about, which was the city, the aldermen finding money to spend at a time when our school district has got a pay freeze too, right? The teachers have been out of contract and haven't had a pay increase. Now for the contract's been out for over a year, but they had a contract for the preceding 3 years, and then they didn't have a contract for years before that again. So they've spent as much time out of contract as in it in recent years. So anybody who's been in the school district for, say, 10 years have had multiple years where they didn't get their steps or colas or anything else. But while this is all going on, we had an occasion 3 months ago when the Boroughmayor and Alderman decided to fund a program for $30,000 for a nephew of Alderman O'Neill's, so that just because they, for whatever reason, they decided to fund it. Which, forgetting about the merits of it one way or the other, the point is the money was found. Well, let me go back to the story that I was telling when you called, which was I went home the other night. I was watching the TV, listening to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and next thing I hear that that the city is bonding $4.2 million for a ballpark for Trinity High School, and that just blew me away. I'm thinking there isn't a dime there to pay teachers. Our subs haven't had a pay increase in years. The last time they actually it was a pay decrease they got. Our paras, our administrative staff, or everybody, nobody has had all the 5 different groups within the district are all out of contract right now. Or their contracts at least are up for renewal right now. The teachers is out, and here's the city finding money to build a ballpark for Trinity High School, and it just struck me the wrong way from multiple angles. And first of all, I want to say about this is that. Trinity High School as an institution, I happen to be Catholic, and so that's a Catholic school, and I think, there's a strong and long tradition of Catholic education, and which I'm very supportive of. I want to say that because what I say later you may cause you to rethink that. Secondly, Trinity, and that's a Catholic education writ large. And I'm all for it. If people choose to send their kids to parochial schools and have the wealth to do it, then good for them. It's a free country, so to speak, and certainly Catholic schools have done a good job for a long time. So it's not born of that. I also, in particular, about Trinity High School. My wife went to Trinity High School. My sadly departed sister-in-law was a class president for her year at. The year she graduated from Trinity High School. My deceased father-in-law was Bob Sullivan. He was a graduate of Bishop Bradley, which eventually became Trinity High School. And many of the people who work and lots of the parents who send their kids to Trinity High Schools are friends of mine. So this is not. It may be difficult for the ears of some people who are part of the Trinity family to feel as though they're being attacked by me, and I don't want you to think that, but because that's not what it's driven by. But there is a problem with the City of Manchester having no money for textbooks, for technology. There's a spending freeze on in our schools, so there's no money for paper or pencils. We have all kinds of problems. We've got nearly 14,000 students in our schools, and somehow the City of Manchester decides that this is a good time to do a deal for the Derryfield to put a new, eventually a $4.2 million. Or up to $4.2 million. The first phase is $2.7 million for a new turf field and artificial surface with a grandstand and bleachers, with fencing, with lights. It's a beautiful looking, it looks like a beautiful facility. And it's also important to note that in this case, Trinity High School is... the bond is being issued by the city and the money borrowed by the city. Trinity High School is paying 60% of the cost and the city's paying 40%. So from that point of view, you could argue, it's a good deal for the city. Well, I have a number of arguments against it. The first one is the cost of that bond is going to be $120,000 per year, with another $20,000 for a capital expenditure fund, which is going to be accumulated over the first 10 years. And so that comes to $140,000 per year. Well, that's the cost of 3 teachers in Manchester. That's the annual cost. And so the first thing that bugs me is that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen somehow, before we get into the budget hasn't been even completed yet. We haven't looked at the numbers. We have no idea what programs are going to be cut in the Manchester schools. We have no idea what what number of teachers may have to be laid off or riffed. We don't know. We do know that we're hugely underfunded, and for the board mayor and alderman to choose to do this at this time, I think is there's, well, I described it to one alderman as a that the what did I say, like that the tone deafness, that it was tone deaf to do that at this time. So that's my first problem with it. My next problem with the entire thing is the fact that the way in which the contract is written. So this contract would be for 20 years with an option on a further 15 years. And so for 35 years, for the next 35 years, Trinity High School will control the field at Derryfield Park. Now, it's important to note that there's lots of misinformation has gone out on this topic, and that bugs me because it may be little mistakes, etc., but they're very convenient mistakes. It's been said, for instance, that Trinity High School has got that Trinity High School has had control of those fields since an agreement reached in 2009. Well, that's not actually true. I went to City Hall today and visited with the city solicitor's office, and I visited with the city clerk's office, and in the end I ended up doing the research myself and finding the 2009 agreement online, which you're able to do too if you look. I think it's the May meeting of 2009. And I reviewed the documents there, and as I had been told and as I suspected, the agreement that was reached between the city and Trinity High School in 2009 was that Trinity High School would have first dibs on, or first right of refusal on the use of using the fields for their football and lacrosse or soccer practices, etc. That's an awful lot different than giving them the actual right to manage the entire property. And so when I look at the deal seems to me to be disadvantageous to the city, because the first thing you have to know about the difference between the old agreement and the new one is that with this beautiful new field, when it's built, which is on city property and it's a city asset. If you read the contract, it's first of all, it states very clearly that that Trinity High School controls the field. So I'll read you the exact writing, which is that if I can find it right here. The very start of this, beginning the 5th anniversary. I'm in the wrong end of the document. Back to disbursements. I'm sorry, it's quite a few pages. It says on page 3, Article 1, Trinity shall be solely responsible for the management of the lower field. Management responsibilities shall include but not be limited to scheduling events to be held on the lower field, for use by Trinity, athletic teams, athletic clubs, public-private schools, as well as any other public or private entity, organisation or membership otherwise permitted to use city athletic fields for intended purpose. Now, that by listing those, it would appear that it's saying, well, all of those people are included. No, it's actually doing the opposite of that. It's naming them all and saying whether they are public schools or not. Trinity High School, the first sentence rules from that paragraph, which says Trinity shall be solely responsible for the management of the lower field, which is the field that's now being co-developed, and the City of Manchester is financing, with Trinity paying 60% and the city paying 40%, but the city supplying the field. It also is interesting that when you get right down the bottom of this document, if you have any doubt as to who controls the field from now on, this public asset owned by the City of Manchester, under Title 10, it says, right to enter subject premises. Listen to this. Now imagine a city field owned by the people of Manchester and the taxpayers of Manchester is being signed over to a private entity at its sole management, has sole management of it. Parks and Rec, our Parks and Recreation Department has no say in what happens to that field for the next 35 years. Well, to be exact, 20 years, and at their behest and their option, and the city isn't able to refuse that. If they choose to, they get to renew for 15 years, which, by the way, there isn't a cost associated with the 15 years. That's because it will be paid off, the bonds paid off after the first 15. So their final 20 would be close to free and clear. Not quite, because there is a management fee, but still. So Title 10 says, right to enter the subject premises. The city and its agents and representatives may enter the subject premises for the purpose of inspection upon providing Trinity with at least 24 hours prior written notice. Imagine that. The Mayor of Manchester in 20 years' time would like to go to Derryfield Park, a city park, a field at City Park, on the park, the lower field, or the head of the Department of Parks and Recreation, and they have to write a letter, they have to put it in writing to Trinity High School that they request entrance to the field. Otherwise, they can be refused to go there. So, not to be overly dramatic, but let's be very clear. Legal documents are legal documents. If the Trinity would be perfectly within its rights in the year 2035 or 2045, or as far as 2055 almost, at any point could say to somebody from the city, "You're not entering on this field." And they could call the police and say, these people are trespassing. They haven't given us 24 hours notice. Now, I know that's perhaps hyperbole and exaggeration. I'm sure, knowing the people at Trinity, that would never be their intention, and that would probably never happen. I understand that, but the point is the agreement as written between the city and Trinity High School allows it to happen. It's black and white. It's in there saying you have to give them 24 hours notice to get in. It's there in black and white. They're the sole managers and controllers of the field. Now, Joyce Craig has said at the when I brought this up at the school board meeting last night, she has repeated now twice about the 2009 agreement and that they already control the field, and this is just a carry on from there. That is not true. So let me be clear. That word means not true, means it is inaccurate, means it shouldn't be repeated anymore. I had been advised prior to this by people who knew that the 2009 agreement was first use, that they had the option to use the field with agreement from the city. That's a lot different from what they've been given in this new contract. So let's not have any more repeats of it's just a carry on from 2009, Mayor Craig. It's not a continuation of what happened in 2009. It's an expansion, a dramatic expansion of what happened in 2009. I'll tell you a lot of other things that weren't there in 2009 agreement. When this field is built, Trinity High School is going to pay 60% of the cost, which is very commendable, and that's why and that's why I can understand aldermen voting for it, and they did. But there's shared cost in a very smart move, which I think should be copied by other such developments, is that both entities will put $50,000 a year in addition to what they're spending anyway. They'll put another $50,000, $30,000 of which will come from Trinity and $20,000 will come from the city. So, and that will be put in an escrow account for 10 years, so that at the end of 10 years there'll be $500,000 in an escrow account, which can be drawn upon for capital improvements, anything over $10,000. This is important because we've seen this happen at Gill Stadium, we've seen it happen at Memorial, we've seen it happen at West, where the city has put in artificial turf, which costs a lot of money. These things have an age, a lifetime of perhaps 10 years. We've ended up sweating the asset into 15, 16, and 17 years. At that point, the fields are really beyond usage, and so then you have to re-up and spend the money again. So the fact that there is a management fee there is a good thing, and that there will be a capital fund, and that again is being funded 60-40. Very fine. But then you read the document, and it says that Trinity High School has the right to sell the naming rights to the grandstand and to the subfields and to other facilities. Phase 2 of the project, by the way, has a $1.2 million changing rooms, bathroom, concession and showers building, a 3,000 square foot building that the city is going to bond $1.2 million to build there. But listen to this. Guess who gets to keep the money whenever there's an event held at this new stadium? Trinity gets to keep it, 100%. The naming rights for the grandstand, who gets to keep the money? 100%. If they can find and get planning permission to put a sign up that can be seen from the highway, from the hill right there off of Bridge Street, maybe they can develop 25 or 30,000 a year for a sign, an advertising sign with, Eversource Electric Stadium or something written on it. Whatever they get for the next 35 years, just think about it. That's almost as old as the band uniforms at Central are. Oh, sorry about the little joke. They're not actually 35 years old. The band uniforms the kids walk around in at Central were bought in 1996, just so we know, right? And anybody who's not paying attention, in case this is archived and is found in a million years from now, this is 2019. So 25 years ago, or close enough, or 23 years ago, there's been an awful lot of kids march up and down Elm Street in those uniforms. But I digress. But when members of if the average age of the current board is, let's say, it's 40, they'll be 75 years old before this agreement is no longer valid. And of course, there'll be a mayor like Mayor Craig here in 35 years' time who will refer back to an agreement from 2019 and probably expand and exaggerate the rights under the 2019 agreement, just like we're hearing the expansion of the so-called rights from 2009. If you can't tell already, ladies and gentlemen, I'm appalled. I think that lots of things could have been done here. I think revenue sharing would have been a good thing. I think the city might have wanted to fund this thing 50-50. As it is, the annual cost is $120,000 plus $20,000 for the capital fund side. So it's net to the city $140,000 per year. They could have gone to 50-50. I don't know. I haven't got the math right in front of me, but that might have ended up being, instead of 140, it might have been 155, and it would have been a 50-50 deal. I'm not suggesting at all that this project should never have happened. That Trinity shouldn't be allowed to do it. That's not what I'm saying. My problem is that this is part of the good old boys network. First of all, the fact that it's able to get shoehorned in a year when there's no money, when our teachers are working without pay increases, where a woman spoke at the school board meeting yesterday talking about 39 kids in her class because we can't get subs, and we hear this all the time, that there's a number on paper of the kids that are supposed to be in the class, and then there's the actual number of kids in the class when teachers are out or when they're missing or subbed or whatever else. So we have all kinds of issues in our school district, and how in the name of all that's good and holy can the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, who have no money for anything, suddenly find $140,000 a year for the next 15 years to fund a school, playgrounds, playing fields. Now, just to be clear, there's a shortage of playing fields all across this city. We have leagues and schools with no place to play, and it's a constant shuffle. If you talk to the people at the Parks and Rec department, they have less facilities than they have people looking for the facilities. But the very fact that that's where our concentration is, that this is where we've decided to move, that of all the places you wanted to use money in 2019, right as we begin the budget process, was to commit the city to $140,000 a year for playing fields for what is a private school. The graduating class last year, or the year before, I think it was last year at Central High School, according to its website, had 53 people in it. At 4 grade years, that's 212 people in the school. Give them another 50 kids for dropouts or people who might have left or moved over time. It's 250 kids. When I was visiting there regularly, about 50% of those kids were from the city of Manchester. So So just think about as I talk about the tone deafness, let me draw your attention to a couple of things. Go down the hill 150 yards. You can measure it. Maybe it's 200 yards, but it's not literally, it's spitting distance. And you get to a big building from these fields. And anybody driving by or doing Google Earth and looking at it would think that the fields were belong to this big building, this big school. It is, of course, the Hillside Middle School. By the way, I got to take a little sidebar here. Congratulations to the Parkside boys, who basketball team, who won a competition. Which one I'm not sure right now, but they were. Congratulations to them. They were at the school board meeting last night. I think probably it must have been the city tournament, and then a big shout out also to the Hillside boys basketball team who won the Tri-State, which is the regional or statewide or three counties actually, the Tri-County state championship. That's a big deal, and they were honoured last night as well. So congratulations to them. But there are between 850 and 900 kids at Hillside Middle School. And they're 150 to 200 yards away from this proposed new development of $4.2 million. And now let me say it as plainly as I can. They have no field to play on. Chew on that one for a minute. There is a little field, a field that was once a field, next to Hillside Middle School that it's an abomination. It's got no sprinkler system. The ground has got all hollows and divots in it. You can't play any games there because you could break an ankle. And then to compound issues, about 5 years ago there was a major water break and a big hollow appeared, and the whole place was flooded. And in its wisdom, because it couldn't afford to rain anymore, but the city just, covered up the earth, left the mound there in part of a hole and left it there, and that's in the corner of the field. So that's what the 850 to 900 kids at Hillside are asked to do. Those kids, when they play games, they take the field hockey team and they go over to Prout Park. The soccer team was going over to Livingston or playing games on the west side of the city. There is no field for the kids of Hillside to play in. Now, think about this. Under the proposed redistricting plan, 5th grade will be added to our middle schools. And so there will be about 1,200 kids at Hillside next year or within 24 months. Either next year, the year after next, when it comes in. There'll be 1,200 kids. And guess how many fields those 1,200 kids have? The answer is easy enough because it's very small math, even new or old math. The answer is none, 0, the null set. They don't have a field. But up the street, 150 yards away, there'll be a fence around a beautiful field with nice grandstands and bleachers on it and lighting and an artificial surface for $4.2 million, which will be controlled by a private entity because that's what the city decided to do here. So while the deal on it's looking at the deal in isolation is one thing, the juxtaposition between what is being doled out to the kids of the city of Manchester in the public school and what the Board of Mayor and Aldermen are doing for a private school, albeit, of course, that they have connections there and, the former mayor, we have former mayors who have children there, and we have friends of children of aldermen or friends of children of aldermen, etc., all with connections there. And in the long tradition of Manchester Public Service, of course, we have many of our public representatives sending their kids to public school or to private schools. So while they vote down funding for your schools and mine and the schools that are here to lift the well-being of all our kids and to educate the children of the city, they choose to vote down the funding for those because they're going to hold the line. But then they go and they send their kids to private schools. And you can go look them up, or if you want to call me and I'll tell you who they are. And it's amazing then, or else, of course, they do the other thing, which is they serve on the school board for a few terms, or the board of mayor and alderman, and then as soon as they have children, or as soon as their children are of school-going age, oopsie-daisy, off they go and they scurry out of town and go someplace else because they've done the dirty deed here. but they're not going to hang around and actually send their kids to those schools. So I am appalled at the lack of, at very least, as I talk about the tone deafness, the lack of just the common sense that the visuals here are awful if the actuality isn't. And I'm trying to be nice to them and saying that this isn't they didn't think about it this way and they're trying to do the right thing. Let me, at this point, I'm a bit scattered with this, but I have to commend one alderman who voted against this, Alderman Tony Sapienza, who said that we're in the middle of a budget and there was no reason to rush this right now, that we should see what the numbers were going to look like for the budget before we decided to spend this money on financing a beautiful new field for a private school. And I commend him and I'm grateful to him, and I think the people of Manchester should be grateful that we had one alderman who actually stood up and said, hold on a minute, this doesn't sound right. Now let me go someplace else for you to think about. As I pointed out at the school board meeting last night, and I understand I was talking to the school board, who were not the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and the school board, to the best of my knowledge, were not contacted in advance of this decision by the school board, like many other entities in the city. I don't want to go any further with that right now, but you'd be amazed at the people in the city, the department heads and others who were asked nothing about this and who had it. Anyway, I don't want to say any more about that, but you would imagine that various entities in the city would have gotten together and talked about whether this was how this might proceed and how it would be managed, but that's not the way in which it was done. Somebody, somewhere in City Hall, had this deal put together, and then it was proposed, seconded, and passed, and there you go, wham bam, and $4.2 million of bonding, $140,000 per year. And if anybody's any doubt, if I hear people arguing back about the $120,000, it'll drive me. It's black and white in the contract. Just read it. And where I get the extra 20 from is because on top of the $120,000, which is 40% of the funding the bond that the city's paying, the other $20,000 is the 40% of the $50,000 annual fee that will be accrued every year as soon as we reach year 5. So it'll be $120,000 a year, years 1 through 5, and then years 6 and beyond, it will be, or 6, and then for until the 15th year, it'll be another $20,000 a year. And there's provision for more, by the way, if you look at the document, because I don't want to get down into the weeds of the document, but if you read it, there's actually capacity for that to be increased in the future. But for now, that's the deal that's committed to, and it's all the city has signed off on. So let me, as I shared with the school board yesterday, when I was president of the PTO at Hillside Middle School, I was aggrieved that the kids at Hillside had no place to play. That the field hockey team had to go and travel to one place, that we tried to get a soccer team started, and there was no place for the kids to play. I spent time with the city, and we eventually, Manchester North, where I also happened to be the president of Manchester North Soccer at the time, and Manchester North Soccer acquired sets of goals and had a set donated to the city because the city didn't have soccer goals. And at that time, there was no soccer for middle school in Manchester, and so a group of different groups, including Manchester North Soccer, the PTO at Hillside Middle School, 21st Century, and some private individuals who donated uniforms and other things, got together, and we put together a small soccer program that was basically the 4 middle schools. There would be a total of 6 games for the boys and 6 for the girls, where they'd have a team they could play. They'd play each one of the other schools, and then we'd have a tournament at the end. When this was all going on, totally funded by private individuals, I went to the city and started. We were talking about the field next to Hillside and what might be done to it. And we investigated how to move forward, and the PTO at Hillside offered to pay for the ground preparation. That was the paths that would lead down from the, there's an embankment there, would lead down onto the field, and also for small sets of bleachers along the embankment overlooking the field. The actual field itself, there was a plan going back many years when Ron Ludwig, a name from the past, when he was head of Parks and Recreation, he had recalled that a plan had been developed more than 20 years ago to do something with that field. Simply flatten it, put grass on it, and put in a sprinkler system, and it was around $200,000. And he said that was in a 3-ring binder somewhere. Anyway, the point is that that was put in the CIP budget for capital expenditure, and it was out at that time. Originally, when it was put in, it was planned for like 2023, but that's as good as never, because this was 6 years ago. And the reason why I belabor it is because people have said that they went ahead with the project with Trinity High School because, as Alderman Joe Levasseur said, usually when people come before this board, they come with their hands out looking for something, and in this case we have Trinity High School coming with money in its hand, and it wants to work with us, and that's why it's a great thing for us to do that. Well, I'd like to tell Alderman Joe Levasseur that long before Trinity came with its money on this occasion to pay for a field in Manchester, the PTO at Hillside Middle School came with money in its hand to pay for a field, and it was roundly rejected. And if that's not enough for you, let me go to another place. At Manchester North Soccer League, and there are 4 soccer leagues in the city: Manchester North, South, East and West. There's a nascent one at Manchester Central right now. But these are leagues that charge about $50 or $60 for the season. They're low. It's low cost and a lot of value for. And by the way, if you want to sign up now, would be a great time to start and get ready for the upcoming year. And we'll talk about more of that later. But at Manchester North Soccer, we have about 700 kids a year who play there. About 500 or so who are in the leagues, and about another 200 who are at summer camp. And that Manchester North Soccer League has been around for probably 40 years, but it's been around a long time, and it utilises the one of the fields at the back of the swimming pool at Livingston Park. So about 6 or 7 years ago, or 5 or 6 years ago, Manchester North Soccer decided that it would like to invest in the fields. Now, we at those fields, I'm no longer on the board there, but it continues today. Those fields are maintained by the people at Manchester North Soccer, even though they're used by other entities in the city. Because they're used by Manchester North Soccer, those fields are often resodded, or parts of them have been resodded. We spent, the last year I was there, we spent $14,000 on resodding part of the field. We pay for the fertilizing and the grass cutting and all the expenses with it. So the city of the Manchester North Soccer decided we'd like to actually develop the field. And so we began fundraising. We raised $120,000. And we approached the city with $120,000. Pay attention here. I don't have to pick out just Alderman Levasseur, but since he's the one who was so vocal in his "people don't come here with money in their hands to help us" comment, I'd like to push that right back at him and say that we came to the city with $120,000 and said, you know, we would like to, that was like a down payment on what we might pay. We might have paid $500,000, whatever we could have fundraised. We would have committed to a deal over like this, 15 years. We would have taken that deal. But we were told by the city that no way that the city will not countenance a public-private partnership with you. If you want to spend the money on the fields like you've been doing, you can continue to do it, but there will never be a time when the city of Manchester will will allow any non-profit, even community group have control over what our city feels. So you can imagine how I felt this past week after having gone through those experiences with the City of Manchester, to find that when it comes to the good old boys network, that there's no problem doing a deal with the city if you nod, wink, wink, happen to know the right people. And I'm pretty miffed about it, because we have 13,500 or 14,000 students in this city, and we don't have enough of anything. And there's a plan for Southside and Memorial for the fields there to be done. The running track at Memorial is no longer usable, and in spite of that, the city's alderman and mayor decide it's a good idea to go out and bond, let me say it out loud, $4.2 million to build a field for a school that might have 200 Manchester students in it. It's not even 1%, or a little over 1%, 1.5% of the students in the city. It is unconscionable. I can only imagine in 2 or 3 years from now, and again in 30 years from now, when our kids are still playing in fields with mud all over them and sand growing up through them and holes in them, and there's no, you can't play properly, when that's what they have to play in at Hillside, and they have to look across the street 150 yards away, and they're going to see kids from private schools playing in a $4.2 million stadium that's city land with a fence around it that says if the city wants to enter it, they have to give 1 day's notice before going in. Are you kidding me? It's unconscionable. It shouldn't have happened. The least that could have happened, this deal is fine if it went ahead and someone said, you know what, we're going to bond the $4.2 million for Trinity High School, but while we're at it, we're going to bond 250 lousy bucks, $250,000 to at least roll the grass and put grass in a sprinkler system at the field next to the school that's going to have 1,200 kids in it 150 yards away, so at least they might be able to play there. How about that? Is that what you might do for the people of Manchester? People need to wake up and pay attention here. I know exactly how these things happen. If you're the PTO at Hillside, you can't do a deal with the city, no thanks. If you're Manchester North Soccer League and you come to the city with $120,000, no thanks. But if you're Trinity High School and you have friends on the school board, you get to come in, do the deal, it all gets passed, nobody says anything, there's lots of nods and winks and smiles and handshakes, and we're all supposed to go away happy and it's okay. Because you know what? Because the poor kids will be fine. Their parents aren't even paying attention anyway. What do they care? They grew up on mud patches, most of them. Some of them didn't even come from Manchester. We've got immigrants in there who were playing in dusty fields someplace in Eritrea 10 years ago. What do they know about grassy fields? They'll be fine. We're the city of Manchester. They're resilient, as a former mayor used to say. They're resilient. It's unconscionable. The superintendent was talking at the meeting last night, and he used words like unjust and unconscionable when he talked about some of the things that were happening in our city. And he wasn't talking about this deal of the $4.2 million. I would suggest you all talk to your mayor and to your board and to your aldermen and ask them what the heck are they thinking of, and could they please manage the city's money in a responsible manner and spend the money on the schools where we actually have kids in real needs. We need technology, we need books, we need more teachers, we need to pay our staff, we need to pave parking lots. We have a lot of expenses. I'll leave you with that tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all have a wonderful week. I mentioned Manchester North Soccer and the other soccer leagues. Now would be a great time to sign up for summer camps at the British Coming Soccer Camp, or to go on mnsl.org for Manchester North Soccer, and you can look up Google Soccer in Manchester. And by the way, not just to be a soccer guy, I'm sure there are lots of other sports where once the winter starts coming to an end, we start doing these things. So good night and have a great week from Jim O'Connell. All the best and thank you.